if you're just coming into the event, do you want to grab a drink and come and sit on down? We're about to start. So I'm Naomi and this is Jack. And welcome to Wonder. So Wonder is a week of events where you can explore the Christian faith and ask any questions that you have.
Yeah, so we're about to have a really, really amazing talk from John T. Afterwards, what we're going to do is have a little Q&A after. So I really, really encourage you guys to, if you have any questions or things you want to pin to him, then please be thinking throughout the whole talk. And at the end, we'll float around with the microphone for you guys to ask. So if you could help me welcome John T on stage, that'd be wonderful.
Good evening, guys. Nice to see you all. You all right? That's perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the enthusiasm. That's awesome. Great. Okay, listen to these words. See if you recognize this. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn them. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. You heard those words? Those are words written that are read very often at memorial services on Remembrance Sunday, when people remember those who gave their lives in history, in wars, who fought on our behalf and who died fighting for the freedom we enjoy. There's something about sacrifice which is really moving. And I want you to just think about that for a second. Think about that moment, a moment in history, a moment in the past when someone did something which you enjoy the benefits of today. They died for you. You are connected to that event in the past. Because of their actions in the past, your life is what it is today. That's what sacrifice means. I was at a wedding a few years ago, and I like weddings. I mean, weddings are all right, and mine was fun. Other people's less so. But the worst bit of weddings is the photos, right? Because you've done the service, you're waiting for the food, everyone's starving, you just want some food, and then you have to wait for ages while they take the photos. Well, while they were taking photos, I went for a little walk around the graveyard of the church. I was reading some of the tombstones. That's how bored I was. And I found this really interesting tombstone. It said it was for a guy called Frederick Dyson, who died on the 1st of January, 1869. And I stood there and thought, wow, that's amazing. All those years ago, this bloke, Frederick Dyson, died. And on his tombstone, it said why he died. And it said that on the 1st of January 1869, his friend fell into a pool and was drowning. And Frederick Dyson chose to dive into the pool to save his friend who was drowning, and he died. And there's this poem on the tombstone, and the poem says this. I love this. Listen to this. Fame, give thy silver trumpet breath, a hero to commend, who gave to the icy jaws of death himself to save a friend. Sacrifice is moving. When you think of someone who gave their life in order that someone else might live, that is a moving and powerful thing. And that friend for the rest of his life, I don't know what his name was, that friend for the rest of his life was absolutely connected to that one act in the past when Frederick Dyson gave his life to save him. Do you think he ever forgot? Do you think there was ever a day in his life when he didn't remember the sacrifice that his friend made for him? Yeah, sacrifice is powerful. Seriously powerful. And I'm going to try and show you tonight, I'm going to try and argue tonight, that when Jesus died on a cross, it was an act of supreme sacrifice. Not simply an event that we should look back on and admire or respect or say, oh, wow, that's really interesting, or wasn't that a wonderful model, but a one act from the past that can have profound impact for you today. To the point where it might even be possible for you to leave the tent tonight saying, he died for me. That's what sacrifice is. He died for me. And I want to show you tonight how you could leave the tent knowing that Jesus was not just dying on a cross for the sake of it. He was dying on a cross for the sake of you. That's powerful. I'd love you to have a look with me at what actually happened. On your tables, you've got these Uncover books. Grab one of those. This is a record of Jesus' life written by Mark. And we're going to read about the death of Jesus. So if you just hang on, just get to it. Okay, we turn to page 86. Okay, turn to page 86. Let's see what happens in this moment when Jesus died. We were thinking last night about the mockery. We were thinking last night about how Jesus was beaten and spat on, how people laughed at him, how there was this real sense of weakness in what Jesus was doing. Now let's read what actually happened in the moment when he died. And I want you to notice there's some strange stuff going on. And that strange stuff will give us an indication of what's really happening. So let me read from verse 33, the death of Jesus. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing near this, they said, listen, he's calling Elijah. Someone ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now, leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. Some women were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. In Galilee these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who'd come up with him to Jerusalem were also there. So there it is. There's the moment at which Jesus died. And you notice what happens? We're told of various things. Firstly, we're told it goes dark in the middle of the day. That's weird. That doesn't normally happen. Can't have been an eclipse. It lasted for 3 hours. So some kind of supernatural darkness filled the sky. We need to work out why. What was going on with that? Then we get this cry of Jesus as he shouts out in this loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? What's happening there? And then suddenly we cut from the cross to a temple in Jerusalem. We see this massive, great upholstery disaster as the curtain is torn in two. And then you end up with the Roman centurion going, wow, that must be the Son of God. What's it all about? We're going to see that this is a supreme act of sacrifice. Now, we're going to come back to all that in just a moment. There's some stuff we need to get in place before we can understand why it's a sacrifice. You see, on the 1st of January 1869, the reason a sacrifice was needed was because Frederick Dyson's friend was drowning. There was a problem. So we must first understand, before we can understand what this sacrifice is and why it's a sacrifice, we've got to understand, well, what's the problem? This is the bit you might not like. This is the bit you might want to ask questions about in a minute. This is the bit I'm going to argue and try and show you carefully what the Bible says. And I warn you, you may find this a little bit uncomfortable at times. But if you don't understand the problem, you'll never understand why Jesus had to die. So here is the problem. I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can, then I'm going to explain what that all means. The big problem that we have as humanity is this: God is angry. That's our problem. The greatest problem we face as humanity is not the wrong things that we do or the bad things or the naughty things we do. The big problem facing humanity is not climate change, although that's serious. It's not global poverty. The greatest problem facing humanity is that God is angry. Now, the reason we find that uncomfortable is because that sounds, whoa, whoa, whoa. If there is a God, I don't think he's angry. That's not really what God's supposed to be like. If there is a God, surely his job is to be nice. I mean, surely that's what God's supposed to do. What's the point of having a God if he's not nice and keeps us safe? That's his job, surely. This is why whenever there's a natural disaster or something goes wrong in the world, you get people on the radio saying, well, where was God when all this happened? Sure, I mean, this was his job. This was the bit that God was supposed to sort. He only had one job and he's failed. And many people have this view of God which is just a little bit bland and a little bit boring and a little bit pathetic. The Bible doesn't present us with a God like that. Have a look at these words. These are from a prophet called Jeremiah. Listen to what Jeremiah said. We've got to deal with God as he really is. I can't stand here and kind of waffle at you. Oh, it's me. Oh, how alarming. I can't stand here and waffle at you about stuff, about what I think God is like or what you might like to hear. I've got to tell you what the Bible really says. And that's what you want, right? You don't want me to kind of sugarcoat it and say nice things just to make you feel happy. I want to show you what the Bible really says, because then you'll see why the sacrifice is so beautiful. So hang in there. Look at these words from Jeremiah. He was a prophet in the Old Testament. He said this: the Lord is the true God. He's the living God, the eternal King. When he is angry, the earth trembles. The nations cannot endure his wrath. You see, the Bible speaks very, very clearly about the fact that God is the God who gets angry. Now, we need to do a bit of thinking about that. Before we all suddenly say, no, I don't like this God, that's because our anger is often wrong. I get angry wrongly. I get angry because one of my kids leaves a bit of Lego in the middle of the floor. You ever stepped on Lego? It's serious. Those are the sorts of things that make me angry, the sorts of things that irritate me or spoil my life or get in my way. That's not God's anger. So let's do a bit of work on this idea of God's anger, and then we'll see why sacrifice is so beautiful. I'm going to tell you 3 words that describe God. 3 of the Bible words that will help us to understand what his anger is like. Firstly, God is holy. Over and over again, God is described as being holy. What does that mean? I don't know if it's a word. It's probably a word you might have come across before. We talk about the Holy Bible. It's a sort of word that seems to hang around in churches, but what does it really mean? Well, the word holy is an awesome word. It's one of those words that is meant to, it's a very heavy word. It's a very weighty thing. When it talks about God's holiness, what it means is that God is unique and he's magnificent and he's beautiful and he's perfect. He alone is God. There is no one like him. He's not like us. He is not limited. He's not restricted. He's not small and he's not weak. He is great and he's mighty and he's infinite and he's eternal and he's all-knowing and he's beautiful and he's perfect. God is holy. And I want to suggest that that is good news. It's good news that God is holy because it means that he's a good God. And God's holiness is part of our problem. Because although it's good that God is holy, it also makes him very dangerous. You realize that God is dangerous, right? So I know that this may be slightly blowing your categories of what you thought God was like, but he is dangerous. He's good, but he's not safe. He's dangerous. In fact, he's so dangerous that God often says to people, don't come too close to me. There's a man called Moses who met with God, and God says, don't come any closer, because you are not holy and I am holy. And because God is holy and he's perfect, that means that which is not holy and perfect cannot be in his presence. And we're not holy. We're not perfect. We get things wrong. We fail. We're flawed. And so God has to stay at a distance from us. So when we talk of God's anger, what we mean is that he is holy. It's a holy anger. It's an anger that cannot tolerate sin, that cannot tolerate anything that's not right. Does anyone do chemistry? Yes. Yeah, whoa, the chemist. I was a chemist once, and I spent a year of my life doing research in a lab with a glove box. You use glove boxes? In a glove box, it's supposed to be completely pure. You're not allowed anything in there that spoils it. There's supposed to be no oxygen in it. So they take all the oxygen out, and then you have these massive, great gloves that stick out, and you put your hands in like this. And you have to kind of do all the experiments without oxygen. And anything that's got oxygen has to be kept out. And it's very strict, because as soon as you let a bit of oxygen in, your experiment's spoiled. And God is like that. God is so pure and holy and perfect that any little bit of anything that comes near him would spoil. So it has to be kept away. So God told the people to build him a house, right? Called the temple. He said, I'm going to come and dwell in that house with you, and I'm going to live in the very middle. And the very middle was called the Holy of Holies. That was the place where God's presence dwelt. And do you know what they had to do? Put up a great big thick curtain to keep God away from the people. That's what God is like. He's holy. So you can't just waltz into God's presence. You can't just rock up one day and go, hey, God, nice to I don't know where that came from. Nice to see you. Because he's awesome and he's different. And there's a man in the Bible called Isaiah who saw a little glimpse of God. And do you know what he did? He didn't smile and say, hey, God, nice to see you. He fell flat on his face before the God who is holy, holy, holy. If you could see God now, you would be terrified of his holiness. He is so pure. And you would feel how unclean you are. You would feel how much you've done wrong. You would be so ashamed because of his holiness. Now hang in there. I know this isn't an uplifting talk at the moment. Hold on there. But when we talk of God's anger, that's what we mean. We mean a holy God who cannot tolerate any sin. You may say, I've only ever done one thing wrong in my whole life. One thing is too many for a holy God. So God is holy. Secondly, God is righteous. God is righteous. That means that God is only right, always right, all the time. He's absolutely right. My mum used to have a maths teacher at school, and if she did a piece of work that was really good, she would be given an A. That's fairly standard, although they've changed it all now. You get numbers now for GCSEs. It's completely useless. I don't know what my kids are going to get in these GCSEs. Anyway, you get an A. But the trouble is, if someone did something that was really good, what do you do? If it's better than an A? Well, you get an A+. That was what this maths teacher gave. But see, the problem is, what if someone does something that's better than an A+? It's okay. You get an A double plus. Yeah, but what if someone did something that was better than an A double plus? It's okay. You get an A double plus star. But what? This isn't going to go on all night, by the way. But what if someone did something that was better than an A double plus star? Then you would get an A double plus star excellent. That was the top mark that you could get in maths, which meant that getting an A was really very disappointing. I got an A. But A double plus star excellent meant it was utterly perfect. So if you want to know about righteousness, righteousness is God is A double plus star excellent in everything he does. There is not one tiny thing where God is wrong. He is always right. It's part of his character. Not only is he holy and awesome and beautiful, he's also righteous. Absolutely righteous. He never makes mistakes. He never has to say, oops. He never makes a mess of things. He never does anything where you could point the finger and say, you got that wrong. Now again, I want to say that's good news. To have a God who is always right, only right all the time, that's terrific. It means you can trust him. But the issue is, if God is righteous, then that means he cannot ignore things that are wrong, right? If you're a judge sitting in a court and you are a righteous judge, you will punish the crime that is brought before you. You're not a righteous judge if you go, oh, you murdered someone. Oh, never mind. We all make mistakes, don't we? That's unrighteous. God doesn't do that. So God always must punish sin because he's righteous. And you want him to punish things that are wrong, don't you? If there is a God, do you really want someone who's done an evil thing for God to go, oh, don't worry about it? No, we want a God who punishes sin. We want a God who is righteous. But what we struggle with is then, I don't really want a God who punishes me. So I like it when he punishes you. Well, not you personally. I like it when he punishes the bad people over, not you, the bad people over there. I like it when God punishes the bad people. But the trouble is that because God is righteous, he doesn't stop there. There's not this weird line where he goes, oh, well, you've done some bad stuff, but don't worry about it. There is no one righteous. There is no human being who's ever lived who meets the standard, which means all of us face God's right punishment. Now, the trouble is that we go, yeah, but I'm not as bad as them. I'm not as bad as her. I'm not as bad as... But that's because we're comparing each other to one another. And you can always find someone who's worse than you. But when you stop comparing yourself to others and you lift your eyes to God, who is holy and righteous, suddenly you say, I'm not right. I've lived wrong. I've ignored him. I've offended this holy, righteous God. He is angry with me. He's holy, he's righteous, and the third one is that he is love. You see, at this point, right, you might be saying, well, this God sounds very cold and very distant and very harsh. Okay, the third thing is that God is love. Over and over again in the Bible, we're told he's holy, he's righteous, and he's loving. And the fact that he loves is the reason he gets angry. Anger is a function of love. If someone was to do something to one of my kids, if someone was to run up in the street and punch one of my kids in the face, and I just went, never mind, you would question my love as a father. My love for my children provokes a strong reaction within me. to anger at times. A right anger, a love-driven anger. And here's the deal. God made this world and he loves it so much that he is angry at what we've done to it. He is moved. He's bothered. His heart is filled with pain as he looks at this world. He's not a distant and disinterested deity who sits in the sky, impassive and unmoved and doesn't care. He cares. He is angry about the wrong that's been done to you. He's angry about the ways that you've been hurt. He's angry about the ways that we're treating his world. He's angry because he loves. And so the very character of God is the reason that the Bible says he gets angry. Now, that is different to my anger. My anger is so often about me and my selfish attitudes and what I want. But the God that we're introduced to in the Bible, it's a holy anger. It's a righteous anger. It is a loving anger. God is angry. Now, I've taken some time to explain that, and I hope it's provoked you. I hope it's made you think a little bit more about who this God is. I don't know whether you believe in a God or not, but this is the God that I'm talking about. This is the God that the Bible talks about. I really don't want you to leave tonight with some vague, abstract, fluffy Father Christmas in the sky. I want you to leave with this sense of an awesome, righteous, loving God who is rightly angry at what we have done with his world. Okay. Having got all of that, you think, well, this is a really happy evening. I'm really glad I came. We're now ready to see why the sacrifice is so extraordinary. So let's get back to this moment when Jesus died on the cross. What is going on when the sky goes dark? Why does the sky go dark? Well, darkness in the Bible is a picture of God's anger. And what we're being told as Jesus dies on the cross is that God's anger is being poured out. The holy, righteous, loving God at that moment is angry. And we might say, of course he's angry. They're killing his son. Of course God's angry. No. Because what Jesus then cries out is extraordinary. And you suddenly discover that the anger of God is not being poured out on humanity, but is being poured out on Jesus. Do you remember what he cried? In the darkness, in that moment of agony as he's nailed to a cross, he cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, where have you gone? Why have you abandoned me? Why have you turned your face away from me? Where is your love gone? Why is that happening? Why is Jesus at that moment on the cross experiencing God's anger, God turning his face away? Because Jesus never did anything wrong. He's the only human being who's ever lived, who lived a perfect life. Jesus is the only human who's ever lived a life which is truly holy, righteous, and loving, because he is the Son of God. And at the start of Mark's gospel, God looks at his son and he says, "This is my son. I'm well pleased with him." Gangster. I'm well pleased with him. Jesus is the only one who God was not angry with. He's angry with all of humanity except for Jesus. And then at the cross, as Jesus dies, the darkness fills the sky. God's anger comes and it falls on Jesus, and Jesus is shut out of God's presence. Jesus is cut off from his Father, and Jesus is being punished. That's what's happening at the cross. And Jesus went to the cross to die because he knew that that was how he could save us from God's anger. So Jesus said, this is what I will do. I will step in the way and I will take the anger so that you can be safe. Look, one of the ways that the Bible describes Jesus is being like a shepherd. Okay, so imagine this. Imagine there's a flock of sheep, okay? Imagine we're a flock of sheep. Meh, right? You don't have to join in, it's fine. Just pretend. Thank you. We're a flock of sheep, and a lion is coming, right, from the back, coming out to attack us. Right, where does the shepherd stand? Where does a good shepherd stand? In between the lion and the sheep, right? Not at the back, chucking a little one over the back, going, take this one, have a little one, take him, leave us alone. The shepherd places himself between the lion and the sheep. What we're being told when Jesus died on the cross is that we, the sheep, are in danger because we have done wrong. We've gone our own way. We have lived and offended a holy, righteous, loving God. We have offended him, and God's anger is against us. And Jesus is our shepherd who stands in the way, and he says, no. He spreads out his arms and he protects you from the anger that you deserve because he stands in the way, and the anger of God falls on him and he dies so that you can be safe. And you shelter behind him and you say, he died for me. So Jesus experiences the anger of God. Jesus experiences hell itself so that you don't have to. So yes, God gets angry because he's holy, righteous, and loving, but then he sends his son to save you because he's holy, righteous, and loving, and he says, I will punish sin, but I'll punish my son instead of you so that you can go free. And you may say, that doesn't sound very fair. How can God punish someone else for my sin? I wouldn't ask those questions. I'd shut up and accept it. Because that's what he's done. He said, I've made this way because I love you and I want to save you. And that is why what happens next in the story when Jesus dies on the cross is so important. Do you notice what happens in the temple? Suddenly we cut to the temple. You remember the temple? Big curtain keeping us away from the Holy of Holies. What happens to the curtain? As Jesus dies on the cross, the curtain is ripped in two from top to bottom. Because when Jesus dies on the cross, as he pays for all that I have done wrong, as he takes the punishment I deserve, God says, we don't need this curtain anymore. You can now come in. You don't have to be kept at a distance anymore. You can now come in. And the holy God, because his anger has been turned away, now welcomes you in. I don't know about you. I think that's amazing. When I think of Jesus dying on the cross, I don't think of a man in history who had a bad day. I think of a man who did it for me. Jesus died for me. Jesus gave his life for me. And that one act from history means that God is not angry with me anymore. God has turned all of that punishment away. It's been dealt with in full. It's been paid in full. And now I can come into God's presence and I can know him forever. That's why Jesus died. If you want to know why Christians make a big deal of the cross, that's why. That's why we have it around our necks. That's why we put it up in our churches. That's why we celebrate the cross. That's why we sing about it. That's why we marvel at it. Because when Jesus died, he died for us. It was his death that pays for us. So there's a simple question tonight. The simple question tonight is, did Jesus pay for you? Will you accept the sacrifice that he made on your behalf? Will you accept it? All you have to do is say to him, I deserve God's anger, the holy, righteous, loving anger of God. I deserve that anger. I deserve to be punished. But Jesus, you did it in my place so that I could go free. Please would you save me? That's what it means to be a Christian. That's it. It's that simple. If you like, you get behind him. You stand behind him so that he's your shepherd who protects you from the anger and wrath that you deserve. No one else ever died for me, but Jesus did. And that one-off act of history has changed my eternity forever. And it can change yours too. So I plead with you tonight. There is a God in heaven and he is angry. But he sent his son so that you could escape his anger. I plead with you tonight, accept him. Trust him. Turn to him. Admit you've done wrong and find in him the God who loves you and the God who tore down the curtain to welcome you home. Come home to him. It may be that some of you are ready to do that now. You come along to a few of these events, you've got more questions, but you're ready. You say, I want that. I want to know this God forever. This God who's so righteous and holy and loving, but he sent his son for me. You could do that tonight. All you have to do is say to him, I'm sorry for the things I've done wrong. Thank you for sending Jesus. Please forgive me. Sorry, thank you, please. You could do that tonight. It may be that some of you have got loads more questions. You want to work this out. That's fine. It's great to have questions. But you could take home one of those Mark's Gospels that are on your table. Take it home, read it through. If this is true, nothing matters more. This matters more than your degree if this is true. So I plead with you tonight to check it out, to take it seriously, and to work this out for yourself. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop there, and why not talk about this some more on the tables, and that'd be great. Thank you.